So, what I wish I knew before buying an FXR. Let's check it out. What's going on, YouTube? FXCLS Brooklyn is back in the building. And we have, of course, the 88 FXR. Little startup action for you. We have Jenny in the building. The FXR passenger queen. And yeah, it's been a long 2 years with this bike. I got a lot I could tell you about this particular bike, especially if you're someone that is thinking about pulling the trigger on the holy grail of Harley Davidson's, the FXR. There's a lot I think you should know, and there's a lot I think you should consider. Let's talk about it. Yeah, so it's not necessarily things I wish I knew. I mean, some of the things are things I wish I knew, but it's just things you should probably know if you're thinking about becoming an FXR owner. Okay, so I'll try to give you as many as I discovered throughout the 2 years of owning this FXR. Obviously, I still run this bike. Probably a separate video. I'll give you a 2-year review at some point, but some of the things. So the first thing you should know about your new prospective FXR, especially if you're somebody like me that's coming from the Dyna platform, is it is not your Dyna. And don't try to run it like your Dyna. And this is a lesson I've learned many a time. Even in recent days, I'm still learning this lesson. Perfect example is a buddy of mine, the Fro Rider, who you all see on my channel. We did a little video on him, and we did a video on his new bike. He got that new bike with that Milwaukee 114 in it, and I remember the first day I rode with him, I was on this bike, and I was like, let me show him that this old FXR from the 80s will have no problem keeping up with his modern 2022. So of course I'm riding with him all day, and we are straight ripping, absolutely ripping, mostly highway miles, to the point where this speedometer right here, I could have wrapped the needle around it probably twice the speeds we were going. We're absolutely ripping for probably a good 100 miles, and then 100 miles coming back. So a good amount of highway miles. Things I would do on my Dyna and not even think about it, right? And again, I'm doing my best to keep up and at sometimes pull away from his modern Road Glide. Now, that's all well and good, you know. It was fun. He definitely complimented this bike's performance. You know, the bike is set up to do that type of riding, right? But downside of doing that type of riding is when I came home, I had bolts that had fallen off. I had like 2 new leaks that had happened. The bike was literally falling apart from doing that type of riding. And the first lesson, again, and like I said, I've learned this lesson repeatedly on this bike because I'm just so used to running a Dyna hard on the highways, is you can't really do that with these bikes and not pay the price. Now, don't get me wrong, you could rip hard here and there, but this bike, especially if you're running it with the setup that I have, which is an 80-inch Evo engine with a Woods cam in it, even with that cam, if you're doing that type of riding, super high speed, ripping on the highway, stuff is gonna break, and you should be prepared for that. So again, I've learned that lesson a lot of times, and I'm at the point where when I'm on this bike now, I'm pretty gentle on this bike. And don't get me wrong, I still rip on this bike, but I've been trying to keep it down to the riding that I'm doing right now, which is a lot of backcountry roads, you know, never really needing to go past 70, you know, stuff like that. And I find that when I run the bike in that way and in that scenario, I have a lot less headaches that I have to deal with. And right now the bike is running great. There's literally nothing wrong with this bike. It's in its happy place, and I'm not having to deal with anything. There's no leaks, nothing falling off. It's not struggling to do 200 miles per hour on the highway. And that's the first lesson, is again, if you get one of these, unless it's something that has some serious motor work to it or has a replaced drivetrain or something, I would say make sure you don't treat it like your Dyna, because it's not your Dyna. You're gonna break stuff if you run it that way eventually. And don't get me wrong, I have plenty of friends who do run it that way, but they just pay the price for it. The bike is always broken, or they have multiple FXRs where one is always broken because they're running them like that. So that's the one thing I would say, right? I think the second thing I kind of wish I knew, or what you should know going into FXR life, is, again, if you're coming from something like the Dyna life, it's not like the type of situation where you're gonna go onto the internet or you're gonna go into your Harley Davidson dealer and find readily available parts. You know, I had to search for like a month just to find something as simple as a kickstand for this bike, or gauges, for example. You know, it's really hard to find some specific parts for these bikes. So that's one thing you should know. It's not easy to find parts, but in a way, if you're somebody that, you know, enjoys finding like rare things and good finds at like garage sales or whatever, when you do finally find that part that you've been looking for, it is a glorious feeling. But you should know that parts are generally not readily available for these bikes. But the internet and social media, as much as we hate it, does have its benefits at times, and one of the benefits is there's multiple different Instagram handles and Facebook handles that you can go on specifically to get FXR parts, which makes our life a lot easier than what it would have been, say, 20 years ago. So there's that. Along with that point, the other thing you should know about these bikes is most, if not all, Harley Davidson come in, if you roll in with this bike asking them to do something even as simple as just a general service, be prepared for them to turn you away. I have not yet met a Harley Davidson dealership that will work on a bike as old as this bike, an 88 FXR. So what that means is, if you are not a experienced mechanic yourself that can handle the challenges that these bikes are going to throw at you, you want to make sure that you have a trusted shop or mechanic that you know that you can go to when things inevitably go wrong. So for me, for example, that's Sal Badfoot. You know, if I didn't have Sal Badfoot to take this bike in whenever I break it, I don't know who I would have to work on this damn thing and keep it running. But, you know, luckily I got Badfoot, who is, you know, a couple neighborhoods away, and that's been really the whole reason that I've been able to keep this bike up in the last 2 years. He's been a pivotal force in terms of keeping this thing running, and running quite well as it is right now. I'm pretty happy on it. The other thing you should know is you're probably going to buy your FXR from somebody who has listed it with my favorite phrase from anyone selling a bike. My favorite phrase is no known issues, which to me basically means, hey man, there's definitely some issues with this bike, but I'm not going to tell you them unless you find them out. And then I'll say I didn't know about it. That's my favorite thing when people list bikes to sell. Any FXR you buy at this point is going to have some issues. Again, that's normal. We're talking to bikes that are from the early 90s, the mid to late 80s, right? They're gonna have some issues. Par for the course, right? So when you buy one of these bikes, even if it is listed as no leaks, no issues, starter replaced, all the stuff you want to hear, you should very much be prepared to deal with some issues again and again. Because again, I'm 2 years in, and there were some particular issues on this bike that I had been trying to get worked out for over the course of those 2 years that only just now, 2 years later, I'm starting to see the light of the tunnel with. You know, like I said, I'm really happy with this bike right now. It's not giving me any headaches. So, but again, that's after 2 years of battling some particular issues that we finally got ironed out. So, you know, for me, I kind of see it when people are selling FXRs. There's kind of like two categories. You either have the one that's kind of just a junkyard that's barely running, right? Kind of beaten up FXR. You see those, and then you see the pristine, totally built up with every high performance part. You know, you could go either and pay over 10 grand for that. So you're looking at, for me, with this bike, when I bought it, it was kind of in the middle. Like, it definitely had some character on it, for sure. It definitely needed some work. But at the same time, it also had some performance parts on it. And it had some performance work done to it. So I kind of found something in the middle. Me personally, if I were going and buying another one of these, I would opt for buying one of the ones that's kind of a junkyard and barely running, just because I kind of feel like even if you buy one of the ones that are sparkling and looking real Instagram fresh, you're still going to be dealing with some issues down the road, if not immediately. So you might as well just throw down your 5 or 6 grand or whatever it is and strap in for a wild ride as you work to get this thing dialed in. But when the day comes that you've ironed out all those issues, my oh my, is this bike something else, man. And that's the other thing you should know. And again, this is my personal opinion. My friends always think I'm crazy for saying this, but out of all my bikes, including my 124 Hot Rod FX DLS, as well as my 2001 FX DX, by most people's accounts, probably the two champions of the Dyna line, most sought after year and model bikes. Even with those and all the work I put into those bikes, at the end of the day, I have the most amount of fun when I am on this bike by FXR, doing the riding that we're doing right now. Which is, again, I'm not even going crazy. Like, I got Jenny on the back. You know, I told you, I try not to rip on this bike too much these days. I'm more gentle with this bike than any of my other bikes. But even with that being said, especially for the riding that I'm doing right now, I would definitely say that I always have the most fun on an FXR. And that's something you should know. You know, I find that over the 2 years of being patient and ironing out all the kinks and being patient to find parts and X, Y, and Z, it was worth it, because I've just had so many good rides already on this bike. And you all saw me, even this winter, I ran this bike through the entire winter, through a New York City winter, and it did it, you know? So they're more reliable than folks would have you think, but they definitely are going to need some work if you're going to be running them frequently, which I have been. And yeah, you should know that you're going to be spending some money, man. Like, you're definitely going to be spending some money. So if you are going into an FXR that's whatever you're going into, I would say have that much on reserve. Double what you pay for it, and have that much on reserve for the course of whatever many years, because you might need it. You know, like I said, something is going to need some work, maybe not immediately, but at some point. And again, that's just par for the course when you're running bikes that have been this old. But again, if you are a good mechanic, or you have a good mechanic on your team, you know, you're setting yourself up for some success and some good times. But yeah, you should know that your friends are gonna think you're crazy, especially assuming that you own multiple bikes, because they're gonna see you roll up on some old clapped out FXR, and I'm assuming you're probably gonna be coming off of some Dyna or something else that's really dialed in, and they're gonna think you're crazy for a little while. And the easiest way to show them that you're not crazy is just let them ride the bike, and folks will immediately see why it is you are pulling up on what you're pulling up on. Because, you know, we say it a lot in New York, don't believe the hype, but an FXR is actually one thing that I have found in my experience is actually something to believe the hype about. 100% in my experience. So yeah, I mean, those are a couple things, well, more than a couple, that I worth you knowing about if you're someone that is going in on the old FXR life. I don't regret it. I'll make a video about a 2-year check-in specifically with this bike. But I would encourage you, especially if you're somebody who is if you're someone who's not like on the taller end or the bigger end of the rider base. Like, again, I'm 5'7", a buck 55 pounds, and an FXR probably fits me better than any other bike. So for some context, there you go. Or you could just be like one of those really tall dudes that has their legs buckling out to the sides as they ride these damn things. I'm sure they're having a good time too. But yeah, that's what I gotta say. Things that you should probably know if you're someone that's going in on FXR, because I'm having more and more friends talk about it, and I'm seeing the prices of these things going up more and more, which is crazy, because I'm seeing that exactly what I bought 2 years ago. If I'd be buying this present day, I'd be spending probably 2 to 3 grand more, which is crazy. That's just over 2 years. So they ain't getting cheaper, and they ain't getting easier to find. So if you're someone that is trying to get into the FXR life, I would say consider the points that I put up there and get that damn bike sooner rather than later. That's it, y'all. We're going to enjoy the rest of our little backcountry roads here on our 1988 FXR. As always, stay safe, stay low, ride Dynas, ride FXRs, just make sure that you do ride. Practice positive mental attitude, listen to the bad rains and all that. FX Brooklyn is out.